What do women think about bald men? Let's find out what the research says today on this episode of Christian Date Coach. Let's hit it. Welcome everyone, my name is Dr. Phoenix Singh, and it is such a blessing to be able to have you here with me today, to be able to talk about a topic that is quite literally near and dear to my heart because my old head is as close to my heart as you're kind of going to get. And the topic we're going to be discussing today is what do women think about bald men? And for that matter, what do men think about other bald men? Now, this is a question that obviously impacts a lot of individuals because under 1/3 of individuals by the age of 30 still have a full head of hair. So I know that it may seem like finding a man who's got, big bushy locks and these sorts of things is going to be kind of pretty easy, but statistically speaking, it's simply not the case. Now, these days, in terms of contemporary culture in the West, having a bald head is significantly more fashionable, especially when it's paired with some kind of facial hair. Now, a couple of years ago, I made the decision to try to grow out a big bushy beard, and I think that that's something that all men need to try at least one time in their lives, is to just let the thing Paul Bunyan out, just let the thing go and see what happens. Now, I used to have very, very long hair. I used to play in alternative rock bands when I used to live in England. I used to wear the skull shirts and the fingerless gloves and the whole thing, right, when I was in my early 20s. And that was, was very popular at the time. I had multicolored hair and the whole thing, right? But it's one of these things where, again, I wanted to give it a shot. Why not? At this stage, my options are limited in terms of the number of different hairstyles that I can go with. But I can tell you that I absolutely love being bald. I genuinely enjoy it, actually. I think it's a great look for me. I think that it's something that, if you really embrace it, the confidence that comes along with that obviously is going to come out whether you mean it to or not. And this kind of confidence, right, is the thing that is essentially a proxy for members of the opposite sex. So in this case, if you're a bald guy or whatever for women, right, it is a proxy for having all kinds of good things, right? And remember, as we've chatted about in different videos on this channel, the three things that a woman needs to be able to be attracted to a man are the perception of three kinds of security, right? The first one is physical security. The second one is emotional security. And the third one is resource security, right? Now remember, it's the perception of these things. Now you don't need to get into fist fights, for example, to be able to prove that, you're a guy who she can feel physically secure with. Nor do you need to be a guy who's, 7'5" to be able to make her feel, nice and protected. No, that's not the case. It's not necessary, right? The idea is more to be able to give the perception that, God forbid, some guy comes up with a gun to try to mug you and her when you're out on a date. She wants to feel that you're not going to be 3 blocks away gunning it, right? Leaving her with your wallet and saying, hey, you take care of it. She's all yours, right? No, that's not how anybody wants to feel, okay? So at the end of the day, by having that confidence, and it doesn't have to be a loud, bombastic confidence, it could be kind of a quiet, humble confidence. But by being proud of and taking care of your physicality, you're going to be able to promote all three of those different perceptions that are necessary, right? And there's a lot of good news based on the research literature when it comes to being bald. Both sexes, so both men and women, literature says that they associate balding with greater social maturity, with greater wisdom, with a greater sense of nurturance, right? And remember, in terms of nurturance, that both has to do with kind of emotional nurturance, in this case, emotional security, but also the ability to nurture from a resource perspective, right? So that could be financial perspective. It could be, hey, depending on where you are, it could mean how much farmland you have, how many sheep you've got in the flock, whatever it is. The modern version of this is fiat, which essentially is money, right? And finally is that, you seem wiser, right? In terms of not only just wisdom, but also your age, right? You seem more mature socially, but also in terms of your age, right? They think that you're older. And this obviously has a lot of positive things that kind of go along with it. Certainly if you take a look at, some of, my bald brothers, people like, The Rock, people like Bruce Willis, people like Jason Statham, right? I'm particularly a Jason Statham fan, not only because, he's bald, but also because, body shape wise, he's a pretty endomorphic guy, right? If you actually, take a look at the dude, right? He's not a Dorito, as they say, mesomorphic, right? He's more of like the classic trapezoid, right? When it comes to an endomorph who really kind of physically takes care of himself. And as a guy who myself, growing up, I was always a bit of a thicker dude, really was something that when I started to get into really great shape and really drop the body fat percentage down, I realized, wow, this is much more of a Jason Statham look, right, than it is, somebody who's got like a really tiny waist and, really broad lats out to their shoulders, right? Now, there is obviously some bad news also, but remember that there's bad news about anything, right? And regardless of anything that's kind of negative in your life, there will always be some silver lining, but the opposite is also true, right? So the bad news here is that even though both genders associate balding with greater, social maturity, wisdom, nurturance, and age, the bad news is that neither gender associates balding with good looks or sex appeal, right? Now, this is something where, statistically speaking, right, it's really important to understand the difference between what we call a univariate and a multivariate analysis, right? So for example, let's say that I'm trying to predict something, for example, and what I would do is that first thing I would do is look for individual relationships between different variables and the outcome. So here, let's say the outcome is perceived good looks or perceived sex appeal, right? Let's just say perceived sex appeal, okay? And let's say we go out and we sample 1,000 women, let's say, right, about what they think about bald men, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being sexiest men alive, bald men, and 1 being, oh my gosh, we gotta get these guys away from me as quickly as possible, right? That's 1, right? So if you ask on that kind, we call it a Likert scale, if you ask on that kind of scale, you're gonna have 1,000 data points, that's going to be your outcome variable, right? But then there's also going to be a whole bunch of independent variables that go along with this as well. And this could be anything. It could be, the age of the man in the photos. It could be the race or ethnicity of the man in the photos. Maybe they give information on the man's career. Maybe they give information on his height. Maybe they give information on any number of things, okay? But those can be the independent variables, right? Now, you can explore them one at a time, and they may all be statistically significantly related, right? So yes, age alone, it may be that, the younger the bald guy is, provided he's over the age of 25, right? He's more attractive, right? He has greater sex appeal. Maybe it's something where, a specific race or ethnicity, right? There is a significant relationship such that that race or ethnicity is perceived to be significantly higher in terms of sex appeal than another one. You could find this out by taking each individual variable as the independent variable, testing it against that dependent variable of the Likert scale of sex appeal. That said, right, it doesn't really help us out at all, okay? Why? Because each of those independent variables you need to put together in a block in the same model and then regress all of them together against the dependent variable. And at the end of the day, here's what you're going to find, right? Imagine you got a big pizza pie, and the big pizza pie represents basically the data represented by all 1,000 responses from women, right, in our little mock survey. What's going to happen is that each one of those independent variables in that multivariate model is going to take up a different amount of the pizza pie, shall we say, right? Some of them are going to be bigger, some of them are going to be smaller, and sometimes, oftentimes in many cases, they're going to overlap. Here's the big circle for one of the variables, here's the smaller circle for another, right? And for some of them, there's going to be so much overlap that literally, even though something was statistically significant at the individual level, the individual independent variable level, it's going to drop out of the model. Okay, and so when that happens, even though you may say, so for example, balding, right? You may say, you can't make a blanket statement like, balding is not associated statistically with good looks or sex appeal. That means that men who are bald throw them out, right? Not worth it. Even though this makes a lot of sense if, let's say that, you go to a matchmaker, I'm a certified matchmaker in the United States, and I run a matchmaking agency for Christians based out of DC. But it's one of these funny things where when you take a look, right, at what people put on their profiles, some people are brutal, right? And they'll just say on there, like no men under, 6 feet, or, no women over 5'5", right? People will make these kinds of generic statements. The way that I like to think about attraction is that it's like artwork. Like, I appreciate art, but if you show me 1,000 Picassos, the likelihood is the majority I'm gonna be like, I just don't get it. But there's a couple of Picassos that I'm like, this is phenomenal. Not only do I get it, I deeply appreciate it, and it's so beautiful to me. Attraction, you should think along the same lines. Sure, maybe the preponderance or whatever of people who are, a certain height or shorter or whatever, you don't generally find attractive. And it is fair to be able to have those preferences because every human being has a different central nervous system. And because of that, different things are going to, tickle our fancy. They're going to make us more or less interested. That's okay. Everybody, trust me on this one, has friends who are going to tell you, like, you're so shallow, you only want to date this, or you're so shallow, you only want to date that, right? The important thing to keep in mind is is not to write everybody in a given category out, okay? And this multivariate analysis concept really speaks to this, right? Even though being bald, let's say, in the aggregate at the univariate level is not associated with good looks or sex appeal, it could be that when you take other things into consideration, the height of the guy, the job of the guy, the age of the guy, the race and ethnicity of the guy, it could be that balding literally just totally gets thrown out the window, okay? And the way that we as human beings work is that we don't have to have 1,000 women to survey, right? We as human beings on a daily basis, on like every second, are being bombarded with millions of bits of data. Okay, now most of this, literally 99.999996% of that information is being processed, not in terms of our conscious brain, but in terms of our unconscious brain. I call it subconscious. I'm not a believer in the unconscious brain. That's more theoretical. But the subconscious brain, right, so kind of like our limbic cortex, etc., it processes things at a very automatic level. So like women, for example, it takes them about 13 milliseconds after looking at a guy to be able to figure out whether or not they find them morphologically attractive, right? So this is things like, brows or whatever, ridge lines that come up higher. This is, the ratio of kind of, the chin to be able to relative to the rest of the face. It has to do with so many different things. It has to do with your grooming. It has to do with your bilateral symmetry. It's so automatic, right? But that's a natural, okay? It really is. The important thing to keep in mind here, and it's a running theme on this channel, is that, we need to optimize the things we can optimize. If you happen to be bald, and let's say you put into a multivariate analysis, and being bald significantly decreases your good looks and sex appeal, or if nothing else, it doesn't help. It doesn't boost it up, okay? You gotta trust me, as a bald guy, right, who actively dates, I have never had a problem with being bald, right? In terms of anyone being attracted to me, that's never been an issue. It has never come up. So even though something is true in the literature, it doesn't mean that it's going to be true to you as an individual. Remember, that's the difference between nomothetic data, which is group level, and idiographic data, which is relevant to the level of the individual, okay? So at the end of the day, remember that there are a lot of things that we can do to be able to boost our physical attractiveness, okay? And remember what I always say, right? You don't have to be Bruce Willis or Jason Statham or The Rock, okay? But the three things that I want you to keep in mind, right, that you can do are to be well-dressed, well-groomed, and have good hygiene. And I'm going to add a fourth one in there, to be physically fit. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have a six-pack, for example, for the last one, and it certainly doesn't mean that you need to spend 2 hours a day getting Primptonol in the bathroom every single morning, when you wake up or before you go out for the date, etc. But simply taking care of yourself physically, knowing what looks good on your body, which takes time. It really takes time. By doing these things, though, you can maximize what you've already got. And remember that here on this channel, we're huge believers in both men and women optimizing themselves in 7 key dimensions, okay? And I've got a whole video on this that I'm going to share with you, right? And these 7 dimensions are your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your financial health, so kind of your occupational, educational health, right? And 3 kinds of social health. Social health romantically, social health platonically, it's like your friends, and social health familially, okay? So this is one of those key things where it's great to know the literature. Everybody gets so freaked out if they're balding. Trust me on this one. The number of friends of mine, I started balding when I was like 18 or something, right? And I shaved it off, I think, when I was like 26 or like 20. I'm 33 right now, right? It's like 26 or 27. And I'll tell you, when I first shaved it, oh man, I was worried. You never know what's under there. I was like, what if I shave it off or whatever, and there's like, you know, some random shape or whatever in there that looks like a crop sign where aliens are gonna land on my head, you know, who knows? So I was worried when I initially shaved it off. But after maybe a few days, I started to really kind of enjoy it. First of all, it's pretty easy to be able to kind of maintain and to be able to keep it looking really clean. It's obviously important or whatever to be able to kind of change some of your self-care regime. For example, if you're going out or whatever and the sun is really, really bright. So I was in Australia, for example, giving some lectures a few months ago. Oh man, I had to lather this baby up, right, when it came to sunscreen and all, right? Whenever I'm on television, you know, oftentimes I'll have to go into makeup so they can put something on my head to be able to keep the lights from shining off, right? So it's like a big lighthouse or something, right? In case it's too shiny. So these are all things to be able to watch out for. But if you're confident in it and you own it, let me tell you, it's really not going to be a problem for you, especially if you try to optimize yourself by taking care of those 4 other areas, right, that I just mentioned. So, all right, guys. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I always appreciate you. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching with me, then I warmly welcome you to be able to set up a coaching session with me via the website below, and we can work together. At the same time, please do like this video, share it with your friends, share it with family members who maybe they're balding, share it with members of your congregation. You can also contact me if you're ever interested in me coming to your church to be able to speak or whatever your house of worship may be. It would be a real blessing to be able to do that with you. And please do subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Same thing in terms of commenting below, especially if you enjoyed the video or if you have other questions, other areas that you'd like me to do some research into and present the findings for you. It would be a pleasure to be able to do that. So I wish you all a wonderful and blessed day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed that episode and you'd like to see more original content, then please do click on one of the links right here. I hope to see you in the next one.